It's a real pleasure to be here today. And I really want to thank and appreciate the work of the local Clean Energy Alliance and Bay Localize. And I want to thank each of you for taking time out of your schedule to make this a priority today. You know, what I'm going to talk about today is clean energy future, the poverty of bad energy policies and the power of good ones. Okay, so my theme is going to be about poverty versus power. And I want to start off by saying that sometimes it is better to be wrong than to be right. And, you know, far better that I was wrong and misguided when protesting nuclear energy, the Seabrook power plant 32 years ago, with thousands of other people who descended on the plant to try to stop construction, okay? I far would rather have been wrong about the dangers of nuclear power than the situation where there's only horror at having been shown to have been right about it all these years in terms of what's happening in Japan. And so, you know, really, we've got the poverty of nuclear power, the poverty of the meltdown, radiation poisoning, massive relocation. But also, we got to be clear about the poverty of fossil fuels, the coal mine deaths this year, the Gulf oil spill, the San Bruno explosion. But the power of renewable energy, the fact that we're talking about zero carbon emissions, the fact that we're talking about the fuel itself being free, and the potential for small-scale production, even as small scale as your own home, okay? And there's tremendous power in that. So I've got a lot of things to talk about, so I'm going to go through them quick, okay? Let me talk about the poverty of Prop 23, okay? The poverty of Prop 23 is that it offered us a Faustian choice of choosing between saving our children and saving ourselves, okay? There are people who believe that saving our children dooms communities to struggling to create jobs and make ends meet, okay? And that saving ourselves, of course, does doom our children to a planet that grows unlivable. The solution is the power in the concept of getting the most green for the least green, of how do we get the greatest carbon reductions at the best prices? How do we get increased renewable energy at affordable prices? How do we get greater responsiveness and accountability? Okay? So, let me say a couple words about the poverty of smart meters. The poverty of smart meters is the enormous customer resistance due to the cost, inaccuracy, privacy concerns, and health concerns. Lucrative 11% rate of return on capital investment and double dipping. PG&E not only wants to make its rate of return from smart meters, it's demanding it continues to make its profit from the meters they took out, okay? So it's really outrageous. And it also empowers utilities to impose time-based rates, prepaid service, and remote shutoffs. The power in this particular case that we've seen recently is the power of protest, the power of hundreds of residents in Bakersfield and Fresno who were the first to protest, the power of the thousands who have filed complaints at the CPUC, and the power of the hundreds of hardheads who have continuously questioned the health impact. That is what has led the CPUC to finally make PG&E offer an opt-out. The opt-out of smart meters would have never happened without all of the protests. I gotta say a minute about the poverty of time-based pricing. This is what they want. The proposal now is to have a higher price during the day than at night. We call that daytime pricing. And that the impact is going to be easy, good for the people who go to work in the middle of the day, go to school in the middle of the day, and aren't using electricity. It will be awful for seniors and other people who are home during the day. They are going to pay a price. They want to do something on the hottest days of the year where they increase the rates astronomically. We call that heat wave pricing. We think that that is a matter of life and death, particularly for elderly people who particularly need air conditioning in the Central Valley when it hits 110. The basic fallacy of time-based pricing is the fallacy of the rational economic actor model. We just don't think that most people make decisions based upon their economic self-interest, because if that were so, there wouldn't be so many people in debt and broke all the time. But the power in this is the power of systems change, the power of direct load control of air conditioners, because air conditioning systems is what causes peak use during the day. There are ways to remotely control air conditioner systems. Weatherization, appliance standards, appeals to civic responsibility. One of the most successful programs to change people's behavior, in my estimation, is curbside recycling. I remember before there was curbside recycling. And what's interesting about that concept is it was a civic engagement process. That's what's made it successful. It wasn't price signals. It wasn't putting people in jail. It wasn't all these punitive matters, charging people outrageous sums of money. But they made it easy. They did different colored buckets. And they made people feel it's your civic responsibility to do recycling. Okay, people understand that now. We're responsible. We see those bins out there by the breakfast thing, and we read them and we try to make sure we put the right thing in the right place. Okay, not because we're gonna be charged more, because if we don't do it, but because we've accepted the fact that it's our civic responsibility. That's part of what needs to happen with energy. We need to figure out a way for people to understand it as their civic responsibility. Right. Now, I'm going to move into a couple of things that I think are going to be controversial, because my mentor always told me, if you don't start no shit, there may not be none. So, I'm going to talk about the poverty of electric vehicles, okay? Each electric car takes to recharge a car, it takes the power equivalent to an entire household consumption. That is the amount of energy, okay? My understanding is that the Teslas take the equivalent of 4 households, okay? There's going to be an enormous expense in upgrading the electrical power infrastructure. The current transformers that serve 6 or 7 houses each are already overloaded. They run hot because they get a chance to cool at night. You add electric cars to the system, they're going to have to be replaced if you don't want them to blow up. In reality, my main problem is I see absolutely no possibility that electric cars will end up reducing the number of gas-powered cars, okay? Because the electric car strategy is such an isolated strategy, particularly in light of devastating cuts to public transportation. And in fact, the power here is the power in public transportation and smart planning. What we really need, instead of electric vehicle strategy, is a strategy to invest in walkable, bikeable, residential, and work communities. We need to invest in electric vehicles for public transportation, not private, for public, and we need to have a massive expansion of investment in public transportation. It is outrageous that there are people talking about subsidizing individual personal transportation through the electric cars while slashing public transportation. Makes no sense. So, let me talk about the poverty of green jobs. Okay, I hope that's controversial. Here's the thing. Rising poverty is not due to the lack of jobs in our communities. Rising poverty is due to the rising accumulation of wealth. It's due to the increasing wealth gap. That is what is causing rising poverty in the United States. In fact, a greater amount of surplus value, that's the unpaid labor, okay, is rising to the top. And in fact, I am worried that that jobs in the private sector is actually a long-term strategy for impoverishment of communities, okay? I'm actually very worried about the whole job strategy. Of course, I understand the value of jobs, okay, and the attractiveness of jobs, okay, but I'm very worried that we actually are supporting something that is counterproductive. Now, let me tell you the power, because I'm not going to bring something up without a solution, which is the power of public sector employment. Yes. Okay? First of all, in the public sector, you've got union representation of 50%, compared with union representation of 5% in the private sector. That means that the public sector is where livable jobs are located, okay? All the surplus labor value remains, okay, when you've got a job in the public sector, it remains in the public sector, it remains local, okay? That's also true for nonprofits, by the way, okay? So what I really want to encourage is that when we are fighting for jobs, when we're fighting for green jobs, I am going to suggest that we make a distinction and do everything we can to say, and we want those green jobs to be in the public sector, to be in the nonprofit sector as much as possible, okay? Now, let me talk for a minute about the poverty of utility-managed energy efficiency. We're talking about $1 billion of annual of money that comes out of our bills, okay? $1 billion per year. We're talking about continued failure to meet energy savings. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of unearned shareholder incentives that are paid. And we're talking about a serious flaw with the concept of energy efficiency that permits overall consumption to rise. Let me tell you something. There is no sense in my mind to be spending $1 billion a year on a program unless the yield is significant reduction of energy consumption, okay? And so the power of community managed, okay, energy reduction programs is that we can change that emphasis from efficiency to reducing consumption. That we can focus on long-term solutions to reducing energy, such as weatherization, air conditioning, white roofs, customer engagement, and we can redirect hundreds of millions of dollars from executive bonuses, from shareholder bonuses into programs that help people save money and save energy. Now, let me talk about the poverty of private utility increasing revenues, okay? Because the thing is that the private utility model, like most models of corporations in the US, is based on the assumption of rising revenue, increasing revenue year to year to year, okay? I guess that's what profit's about. So the thing is that we know that if you use more energy, that if there's increased energy use, the bills will go up because you need to build more generation. We got that. But the problem is that decreased energy use causes bills to go up also because you've got to meet the revenue requirements, okay? If we use less, our rates will go up because the utilities right now have a right to collect whatever the PUC says is the right amount. The problem is that customers expect that when they use less energy, they ought to pay less money. That's what I expect anyway, okay? So, the power here is the power in public utilities and in community choice aggregation. That public power authorities have the incentive to provide the best quality at the lowest prices because they're located in a community, because most of them are elected by the community, because they have an open meetings, open process, and they're accountable, okay? They're looking at the lowest possible price instead of PG&E, who comes to every PUC proceeding with the question, what is the highest possible price we can get away with asking for, rather than what is the lowest price we can possibly charge the customers and deliver top quality service. Okay? So, also with public agencies, when you have revenue decreases because of a bad economy, guess what? You got to figure out a way to spend less. That's just how it is in the public sector. Okay? You get less revenue, you got to spend less money. And public power represents a standard against which to hold private utilities. So, I want to talk about 3 urgent challenges to a clean energy future. And the 3 urgent challenges I'd like to leave you with are, 1, if we want to reduce carbon emissions, if we want to phase out nuclear power, okay? Nuclear power has absolutely no place in a clean energy future, period, okay? Period. Okay. But if we want to accomplish these things, we absolutely must figure out a way for drastic reductions in energy consumption. Nothing is more important than reducing energy use, and I mean nothing, okay? That is number 1. That is what makes a renewable energy viable, is reducing the amount. So the second is we've got to shift from a profit center model to a social policy model for reducing energy use, okay? We have to shift from depending on the private sector for solutions, from depending on new technologies for solutions, from depending on the free market for solutions, and we need to move to social policy, government intervention, to regulation to solve our energy problems. We need a plan. It needs to be comprehensive. And the third thing I'd like to say is we need to fight to win positions of policy-making power. It makes a difference. It makes an enormous difference to have appointed officials, to have elected officials. It is going to make a huge difference that we now have people like Michael Florio and Catherine Sandoval on the PUC. That will make an enormous difference. Having people like Carla Peterman on the Energy Commission does in fact make a difference, but there's so much more we need to do. We need to look at electing assembly members and electing senators who believe in the importance of the principles of how we figure out how to reduce energy use, how do we encourage renewable energy, how do we make sure that we've got a social policy model for addressing the energy problems rather than a profit center model. So this is going to be an enormous fight. I am pleased that TURN is part of this fight and that we will work in partnership with Local Clean Energy Action, with other groups. We will not agree all the time on everything, but the main principles, okay, of how do we get the most green for the least green is what we are absolutely committed to. Thank you.